like accountability when it comes to belonging, because I've heard stories of like three people talking or three people standing next to each other, two in which are talking, and the other one is just standing. And then after they're done conversing, the third one says, well, that person was really rude. He only talked to you. They didn't talk to me.
Mm.
And then the one of the two people says, well, did you say anything? Did you talk to them? Or are you just expecting them to come to you? So a lot of the times in society, we have this victim mentality where we're waiting for other people to cater to our needs without speaking up and standing up for ourselves. And so sometimes that feeling of belonging, like nobody's introducing themselves. I'm the new one. Aren't they supposed to talk to me? If you are needing that and you're wanting that, take accountability and go get it. Go get after it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're all about here on this podcast is taking action, taking accountability, taking control of what you can control. So the ability to feel capable to speak up for yourself and to insert yourself in those conversations, whether it be at work or home life, it's a belief in your strengths and your skills. So this is another element of self esteem. And so someone might feel like they belong, and that's a source of self esteem until they're in a room with other people that are maybe more in touch with their skills and they're talking and they're, have shared expertise. Quickly, if they're not feeling competent, their self esteem might fluctuate.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one that I think is really important to speak about is purpose. And this really encompasses the other three elements: identity, belonging, and competence. It's about knowing what you will do once you have your strong sense of identity, your strong sense of belonging, and the skills and the competence. So, what are you going to do? How are you going to make an impact in life? And if you've met someone who has this like element of purpose, don't they just have this like air of confidence, almost this shiny aura, and you just gravitate towards them?
Oh, yeah, totally. There's like people, I remember talking about this in high school where there's this girl who just had all this confidence, this high self-esteem. And a friend of mine said, it looks like she just has this like sparkly stuff coming out of her face. Like she's glowing. It was just funny the way she said it. Like there's just certain people that just have this look, and I think it comes from those components that you're talking about. But remember, competence also comes from experience, and you will gain competence when you actually try and putting yourself out there. And so that goes back to overcoming your fears of trying new things, and remembering that will help you to have higher self-esteem because you'll be able to combat the lack of experience, lack of competence, and create competence.
Welcome to the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast, where you master your mind and coach your own comeback. You are the hero, you are the guide, and you will learn to architect your life from the inside. I'm your host, Bretagne Stowe, joined by my sister and co host, Anike Wilder. Enjoy the show.
So now that we've talked about self-worth and that it is innate, how do we talk more about building self-esteem? Because that ebbs and flows, it fluctuates. And let's just say the perfect person remembers who they are and they know how worthy they are. They know they're made of light and love. But then there's this other part that's ever changing. How do we get back to controlling and helping build self-esteem?
Yeah, so self-esteem comes from a few different areas and it depends on the person. It also depends on the stage of life. So the four biggest areas where self-esteem comes from is achievement, appearance, relationships, and financial. So let's break that down a little bit. Achievement. So at a young age, your grades, your goals, but even as you get older, if you're very achievement focused, maybe it's about the next regional position, VIP position, you're constantly climbing the corporate ladder. That is someone who gets a lot of their self-esteem from achievement. For appearance, this is more focused on the physical self-esteem, which we've already decided we're going to do a whole episode on physical self-esteem because it is an area that a lot of us uh, lack confidence and lack self-esteem. I know I have a personal story about that, but this is where your body image and your style come from. For relationships, this can also be something that is affected at a young age because your parents will, bestow self-esteem onto you before you understand what it is. It can be tied to achievement, and relationships can be quickly tied at a young age. And that is your relationship, not just with your partner, but your teachers, your siblings, your friends, your kids, and then financial. And we want to make sure that we talk about this as an over encompassing source of self-esteem, but often financial self-esteem affects men the most, while women, appearance and relationships tend to be a source of self-esteem more for women. But you can be very financially driven and have a lot of your self-esteem come from finances, and you be a woman too. But there are some differences on gender and how you grew up and your experiences. And financial can appear in not just the money in the bank, but things, the big house, the Rolex, the Birkin bag, whatever status symbol you have.
And these are all external. If you notice, we talked about achievement, appearance, relationship, financial. These are all things that you can gain from like outside of yourself, whereas the self-worth is internal. So in order to have high self-esteem, do we have to have all of these things? Can we have some of them? Can we have one of them? Like, let's say I don't have great self-esteem with my appearance, relationship, or financial, but maybe I've got good grades, good goals, and good work ethic. Would I have a good self-esteem, or would it be like a partial self-esteem?
That's a good question. So that depends on the individual. And I think understanding the elements of self-esteem can help explain that.
Okay.
So there are some elements. If you Google this, you research this, when it comes to self-esteem, depending on the expert, some person is going to say that there are 3 elements, there are 5, there are 7, right? Everyone has their opinion. I've locked in on 4 that I feel very strongly about. And those 4 are identity, belonging, competence, and purpose. So, identity, your sense of who you are, how you identify yourself, personal characteristics, knowing your values and beliefs. So, Annika, you asked, can you have self-worth, or excuse me, self-esteem, right? There we go. Got to be careful not to interchange those. Self-esteem coming from achievement, but maybe you don't have it from appearance, relationship, or financial. Well, then we go to our identity and your sense of who you are and how you identify yourself. When you meet people, are you quick to say, I'm the VP of this company? Right. So, how are you identifying that? Helps you to identify where your self esteem is coming from. It probably comes from achievement. Or are you quick to say, I am the wife of Dan Wilder? Maybe your sense of self esteem is coming from your relationships. So that's identity. The next one is belonging, feeling connected to others, feeling like you have a place where you belong and you are accepted, whether you are the same or you're different. This is really important. I think this is a place that I have struggled with my self-esteem. And so I know that this is a source for me is I need to have a sense of belonging, not saying I have to look like or be like everyone else, but having a feeling of acceptance. And not having a feeling of acceptance has damaged my self-esteem. Annika, when we talked about moving a lot, being military kids, do you feel like your self-esteem, one of the sources has been a sense of belonging?
Well, and I actually was going to challenge this too a little bit because I mean, yes, but also because we moved so much, it was very easy to insert myself into different friend groups to find friends very quickly as like a survival tactic. But when it comes to belonging, couldn't one feel like they belong anywhere they are?
I would hope so. I would hope if you have a very strong foundation of self-worth and you have a healthy self-esteem, then yes, you should belong wherever you are. Wherever you are, there you are, right? If you are completely alone or you are surrounded by others, if you are the only person who thinks a certain way or you think like everyone else, then yes, I would hope that you would have a strong sense of belonging wherever you are. But I think that this to go in another direction, it's also a sense of like social acceptance, right? You don't want to be the outcast. Maybe people don't judge you or treat you different, but you do want to be a part of society. You want to be included. You want to be make an in a difference within the group. And so I think there is a social aspect and not just locked on the word belonging.
I agree. And I also think there has to be some kind of like self empowerment and uh, like accountability when it comes to belonging, because I've heard stories of like three people talking or three people standing next to each other, two in which are talking, and the other one is just standing. And then after they're done conversing, the third one says, well, that person was really rude. He only talked to you. They didn't talk to me.
Mm.
And then the one of the two people says, well, did you say anything? Did you talk to them? Or are you just expecting them to come to you? So a lot of the times in society, we have this victim mentality where we're waiting for other people to cater to our needs without speaking up and standing up for ourselves. And so sometimes that feeling of belonging, like nobody's introducing themselves. I'm the new one. Aren't they supposed to talk to me? If you are needing that and you're wanting that, take accountability and go get it. Go get after it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're all about here on this podcast is taking action, taking accountability, taking control of what you can control and not playing that victim mindset. And so another piece of that, and this flows really nicely, is competence. So the ability to feel capable to speak up for yourself and to insert yourself in those conversations, whether it be at work or home life. It's a belief in your strengths and your skills. So this is another element of self-esteem. And so someone might feel like they belong, and that's a source of self-esteem until they're in a room with other people that are maybe more in touch with their skills and they're talking and they're, have shared expertise. Quickly, if they're not feeling competent, their self-esteem might fluctuate.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one that I think is really important to speak about is purpose. And this really encompasses the other three elements: identity, belonging, and competence. It's about knowing what you will do once you have your strong sense of identity, your strong sense of belonging, and the skills and the competence. So, what are you going to do? How are you going to make an impact in life? And if you've met someone who has this like element of purpose, don't they just have this like air of confidence, almost this shiny aura, and you just gravitate towards them?
Oh, yeah, totally. There's like people, I remember talking about this in high school where there's this girl who just had all this confidence, this high self-esteem. And a friend of mine said, it looks like she just has this like sparkly stuff coming out of her face, like she's glowing. It was just funny the way she said it. Like there's just certain people that just have this look, and I think it comes from those components that you're talking about. But remember, competence also comes from experience, and you will gain competence when you actually try and putting yourself out there. And so that goes back to overcoming your fears of trying new things, and remembering that will help you to have higher self-esteem because you'll be able to combat the lack of experience, lack of competence, and create competence.
You're absolutely right. But Annika, this brings me to the next thought here is, what if you are not at a place that you can have experience or even allow yourself to be aware to make changes? Maybe you don't feel safe at home. Maybe you don't have a home. Maybe you don't have food or water. How does self-esteem play into that when some of your other needs aren't met?
Yeah, this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? This is super important, that if you are like dying on the side of the road, you might not be trying to achieve things or fit in. You have your survival needs, but first it starts with the self actualization, right? That's the very first thing. if I remember correctly. You
Well,
have
self actualization is actually the top. So the very first thing are those physical needs. So
right. I was thinking like being aware first. So I guess I got
oh,
it mixed up. But
yeah. Well, I mean, we have to be aware first.
yeah, like you have
Absolutely.
to kind of hit like rock bottom, right? Like you have
Yes.
to be like, okay, my life sucks.
Yeah.
So like something has to be fixed. But you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say it like that. So physical needs has to be first. And so if you are not physically taken care of, you have to take care of those needs first. That's just, it always has to come first. That's why I talk about how your health has to come first. Because if you don't take care of your health, you don't have energy to succeed in the things you want to do. You're not going to have the relationship you want. You're not going to have the business you want. So you have to take care of the physical things. And it's okay if your purpose in your life right now, not your overall big purpose, but if your purpose right now is just making sure you've got good air, good water, good food, good shelter, that's okay. You have to get yourself out of survival mode before you can even move up the ladder.
Absolutely. And this is why homelessness is such a problem, is because the individuals who are homeless, their very basic needs aren't being met. And if you don't have your basic needs, your physical needs being met, you can't have your safety needs or your social needs. You'll never even get to self-esteem or self-actualization, which is the goal in this experience, is to be able to experience each of those levels. And so you're absolutely right. So self-esteem is the fourth layer on the five-tiered Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, we talk about if your physical needs aren't met, but what if as a child, maybe your physical needs were met, but there were experiences that shaped you early in life that have impacted your self-esteem? One example could be if a child is only praised based on performance, they learn that self-esteem is conditional. And again, it ebbs and flows, and we know that. But a child doesn't know a difference between self-worth and self-esteem. And so if they're only being praised when they do something, great, like get straight A's, then they'll start to tie their entire worth to straight A's and that performance. On the flip side, if a child only gets attention when they act out or when they're bad, they will start to associate their esteem with being the kind of person that is unworthy of self-esteem, because the only time they're being recognized is maybe when they're disciplined or when they're being yelled at. So they go, okay, I'm the type of person that doesn't deserve recognition for performance, for doing well. I will probably always have a low sense of self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. And I actually have a client that I was coaching when I do my EFT sessions with clients, and all of her self-esteem came from when other people showed appreciation for her and said thank you. She got very upset when she would do things for people and there would be no gratitude. And she's like, why aren't they saying thank you? Like that really upsets me. And she would not have as fulfilling relationships because she put all of her self-esteem, all of the weight on these external forces of other people's actions on her. Instead of feeling good that she did a good thing, she was waiting for that external validation that is temporary. And I think that you were going to identify the external self-esteem versus internal self-esteem. Do you say those are different?
Yeah, yeah, that's a perfect example. And I understand, right? When we throw a party or we do an act of service, we want to hear thank you. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's good manners. I hope I raised my child to say thank you. And we don't want to get rid of that. But what shouldn't happen is if someone doesn't say thank you, if someone doesn't acknowledge how pretty you are that day, that doesn't mean you shouldn't feel beautiful exactly as you are. And so those are the external self-esteem. And often when we allow ourselves to get all of our self-esteem from external forces, we can get into that comparison trap. And a great example of that is social media. People who spend hours on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and are constantly posting to get those likes. Again, don't get me wrong. I love my likes. I love my comments. But my self-worth is not, my self-esteem is not based on if I get 12 likes or 100 likes. if I get comments and emojis, when you start to put your whole self esteem into these external forces, when you don't get them, what happens, Annika?
Well, then you don't have as high a self-esteem.
Exactly. And you are no longer in control,
Mhm.
right? This podcast is all about taking responsibility, taking accountability. So that internal self-esteem is where we want to focus. And that is tied closely to a healthy self-worth. And that's why we talked about that first the previous episode. And you are worthy. Remember, you are worthy. It is innate. It cannot change. And we need to know that first before we can ever balance out our self-esteem and how it ebbs and flows. But also it's discipline. So building on small actions every day, the things that no one sees. They say that's what builds character, right? Your character is what you do every day that no one recognizes you for. So having your values locked in and having discipline. So like working on this podcast or book and not needing, to post about it and not getting the likes, but just knowing that every day I'm showing up for myself is how I'm going to build some of that internal self-esteem. Again, it's linked to those personal values like curiosity or kindness that reaffirm your identity regardless of external success.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like you could have high self-esteem that comes from external forces, but that's temporary. And those external forces are feeding your ego. And we don't want to be in a state of ego. We want to be in a state of what my therapist a long time ago called a soul dominion. We want to come from our higher self. We want to come from the soul place, not our ego place. And when we're only relying on the external forces, yeah, our self-esteem will get high as long as those things are there. But as soon as they're stripped away, who are we? And so like I love that you said the internal self-esteem comes from discipline, and it could be like waking up on time. Nobody sees whether you sleep in or not, and making your bed or taking care of yourself. That should give you a sense of self-pride and self-accomplishment and self-esteem when you're doing those things for you and nobody even knows about it. There's no likes. There's no one standing at your bedside saying, "Oh, good job for waking up this morning," unless you're posting every waking moment. But the internal self-esteem is so important. It's so much more reliable than those external forces that are only feeding the ego, which is only temporary. It only makes you prideful. It doesn't make you humble and confident in a more natural and longer lasting way.
Yeah, I like to imagine it like an artist. So the beauty of self-expression without paying attention to critics, just the art of creating to create. And when you allow yourself to just be, whether people accept you or not, whether you get those likes or not. I remember hearing this quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was something about how what people think of you is none of your business, right?
Yeah.
And that should go for both good and bad, both positive and negative. If you compliment me for doing a great job, that feels good, and I'm going to say thank you, and I do appreciate it. But that shouldn't all of a sudden give me the biggest boost of endorphins that I have felt in a long time. That's dangerous, because that means I'm putting weight in what you're saying. So then what if I do a good job. I think I did a good job. And then you tell me, geez, Annika, or geez, Bretagne, you really dropped the ball on that one. All of a sudden, I am devastated and I feel so low and incapable. So, whether it is positive or negative, we really have to start separating what other people say, the external forces, the external accolades from our self esteem.
And this is why I love, we're probably going to mention this a million times, but in the four agreements, the Toltec wisdom, Toltec actually means artist. I don't know if you remembered that, but it means
I
artist.
I totally forgot that, but it makes so much sense because that's one of my all-time favorite books.
It's so good. And one of the agreements, and the four agreements is basically these rules for life. And it's a belief system, and it's from ancient, Mexico. And one of the agreements or a rule for your life is don't take things personally. Like you said, like it's none of their business. And it also means whether it's good or bad. Because if you take things personally, then it's to assume that it's all about you. And it's not all about you.
Wait,
And so
what? It's not all about me?
well, it's all about Bretagne, but
Right.
it's not all about you.
Right. Yeah, don't get it twisted.
Yeah. So whether it's good or bad, if we take things personally, it's just assuming that it's all about you. And we talked a little bit about this before recording, that people will project their insecurities and their belief systems on you. So their negative opinion about you is probably their negative opinion about themselves. So why do we put so much weight on it anyway?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So for the coach yourself segment, we do not expect you to tackle all of the areas and all the elements. Just choose one area where you feel like maybe you're uh, lacking, and maybe it's comparison scrolling. Maybe you spend a lot of time on social media, and notice how you're feeling when you're doing that. Most people, I'm telling you, there are studies, most people don't feel good the more time that they spend on social media. Even if you had high self esteem before opening up that app, it doesn't matter. The longer you are on those social media platforms, there are studies that show that your self esteem will start to decline because you naturally will start to compare. So, first, just pick one area and then ask yourself, where did my self esteem come from in this moment? And it could be achievement or appearance, or is it external? Is it internal? Maybe you're doing really great with this and you can just stop at step two. But maybe you notice that a lot of your self esteem is coming from those external forces. So, how can we shift those? Well, we want to start going more value based. Instead of saying, like, oh, I'm beautiful and all these people recognize how beautiful I am, we can say, I think I'm beautiful because I take care of myself, or I am kind and I am compassionate. I'm a beautiful person inside, and allowing yourself to go inward. So bringing some of those value-based beliefs to the surface, and then a prompt, an internal affirmation, like saying, I am a beautiful person because I am a kind person, or I am strong in my belief in myself, whether anyone else acknowledges it. So, coming up with an affirmation that you can say will help you work through that. So, step one, acknowledge what comes up. Step two, asking yourself, is it appearance? Is it break it down? Step three, shift from external to inward, and then help create that change by saying an affirmation. We talked about EFT also in a previous episode. This is a great place that you can use EFT as a modality to help you get through that.
And, to quote you, Britannia, stay curious. Always, always stay curious. The more curious you are, the more open you are to receiving inspiration from your higher self, from God, and to make you a better person with more self-esteem. So when you're staying curious, you also can ask yourself, where is this motivation coming from? Like, for example, I'm getting up and getting ready. I'm putting on makeup. I'm putting on jewelry. I'm putting on nice clothes. But for whom are you doing that for? Is it for yourself or is it for the people you're going to see today? Do you dress differently when you go to work versus when you go out with your girlfriends versus out with your husband or boyfriend or significant other? Or if you're just going to be home alone, do you dress up for yourself? Do you take care of yourself if you're not going to see anybody? So, questioning yourself before you even get started. Why am I getting ready? What is my intention? What is my motivation for looking nice today? And that could be a really good indicator of where your external or internal self esteem comes from.
And remember, while your worth is innate and your esteem may fluctuate, it doesn't mean it has to be left to fate. This has been another episode of the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, subscribe and share the love. And remember the teachings of Lao Tzu. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Until next time, trust yourself, take the wisdom, take the breath, and take the next step.